Britain's centuries-old love affair with gardening is legendary. Now, a nation of gardeners open their gates to celebrate their inspiration, passion and talent. Join us as we visit a world of gardens.
My name is Gillian Eade. Today we'll be visiting the southeast of England. Let's visit Geoff Stonebanks at Driftwood by the sea in Sussex. So Geoff, how did you start gardening?
Well, I suppose in many ways I was inspired by my family. I mean, Auntie Margaret, my dad's sister, was a very keen gardener. She had beautiful gardens in both houses that she had. And my dad, he was a very keen and committed gardener and enjoyed gardening. And it's just a real shame that neither of them got to live to see the finished product. Dad did get here and did sit in the garden for a while. They live on in the garden with all the things that are here as well. I then brought all that garden with me in a van as well as my own garden. And I've got many plants in the garden that belong to her. There's some beautiful orange lilies halfway up the path there. They're in a pot planted by Auntie Margaret, God knows when. They're in the same pot she planted them in. I've had them 11 years. They come up every year, they die down, I put them behind the summer house, bring them out every year. And again, my dad had lots of fuchsias, they're all here in the garden. Behind you there's a fish basket under the olive tree there that was used by my father on the fish docks in Fleetwood in Lancashire, by him and his father. And we've had it all these years. The fish crates in the front garden, I've got my grandfather's name, C.F. Stonebanks and Co. So there really is a lot here. My mum is still alive, and sad but true, she says when she died she wants her ashes scattered in my garden. But anyway, it's a very personal garden and it's got a story to tell.
So you chose a garden just feet from the ocean with a brisk breeze blowing most of the year round for your first true garden.
Must have been mad, mustn't I? But at the end of the day, I think I've said to many people, we didn't choose the garden, it chose us, because of all the houses I looked at.
How many did you look at?
140.
Oh, wow.
This is the only one that we both thought was where we wanted to live, because it has got a stunning view at the front. But then you take that with that all the wind and the salt. But it's worked out. It's worked to my advantage in the end, because I've been forced to create something that most people think is quite unique, bearing in mind the location that we're in.
Well, unique. It's a challenge that most people would not even consider.
Probably right.
And the National Garden Scheme, you are on their website as well.
I am.
And I believe you do something for their publicity too.
But yeah, I promote all the gardens that open in East and Mid Sussex across the year, which is about 160 gardens that we've got.
160 in
East and Mid Sussex.
East and Mid Sussex. Yeah. Now tell me a little about the artwork. This is most unusual to see.
Yeah, well, there's art here really on two levels. I like to collect stuff in the garden, because to me the garden is as much about the bits and pieces that are in it as it is the plants. So we acquire art that way as well. But to me, in essence, the art is there to complement the planting, or the planting complements the art, whichever way you want to look at it.
And you're selling some of the art today.
We are.
Also, how did you get involved with the National Garden Scheme?
Okay, well, I first opened the garden to a local charity, Seafood in Bloom, in 2009, and against my better judgment, to be honest, because I thought, it's my garden, it's got nothing special about it at all. And on that first day, we had 200 visitors in 3 hours, and the second 100 all sought me out and said, we've only come because the first 100 we met in the other gardens on the trail said, if you don't go anywhere else, you've got to go to Driftwood. And that sort of made me think, I've got to realise, visitors see garden A, I own garden B, because I don't see the same garden that they do. And that's my philosophy now, because people come in and they go, oh, wow, and I think, well, you're missing that, that's not right, or that's not right. I just give up now and expect I see something different.
Well, tell us how big the garden is, and also what type of soil, if any, you have here.
Yeah, well, big's the wrong word, because it's quite the opposite. It's too small. I mean, it's only 100 foot from one end to the other, and it's about 40 foot at its widest. So it is quite small. Well, maybe if all these people like it, maybe it's worthy of the National Garden Scheme. The thing to me at the time was the National Garden Scheme then, not now, was more into large gardens and country estates. And I thought, well, they're not going to want my garden. And I said, oh, can I open on my own? And she said, God, you've got more in your garden that's of interest than most large gardens. Yes, you can open on your own. So I've been doing that for the last 3 years.
But I believe you also do something for local radio and you write as well, is that?
Well, yeah, I mean, as linked to the NGS, I managed to blag my way onto BBC Radio Sussex. So there's a local gardening programme every week, and I got a monthly slot on there with them talking about National Garden Scheme gardens opening the following year. And then back in 2012, the garden was very lucky in winning Best Small Garden in the UK with a gardening magazine,
Wonderful.
Garden News, on a whim. Entered the Daily Mail National Garden Competition with no aspiration. Anyway, after a little while, I got an email to say, your garden's in the final 12. And I had about 2,500 entries nationwide.
My goodness.
And I couldn't believe it. Anyway, the two guys came and they looked round the garden. About 3 weeks later, I got a phone call, you're in the final 4. And I was just blown away. Anyway, I didn't win the ultimate competition, a guy in Scotland did, but to have got through 2,500 gardens into the final 4 and got that beautiful plaque that's in the back porch there is recognition enough.
And how much have you raised for the National Garden Scheme or
Well,
for charities in general?
We're just edging under £50,000 in
My
5.5 years. So it's not bad going.
Certainly.
I mean, I have to say, people say you've raised, I haven't. I've created the vehicle within which other people come and enjoy, and I have lots of people that help me. So collectively, we've raised £50,000.
It's a National Garden Scheme raising money for charity
Yeah.
by opening the gardens.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, of that 50, 12 and a half for the National Garden Scheme. I'm actually also a fundraiser for Macmillan, who in turn also benefit from the National Garden Scheme.
Now, Macmillan, they're a cancer charity,
That's
aren't
right,
they?
yes. And they're building a local cancer centre in Brighton, and for the last 3 years I've been raising money for that. And of that 50, nearly half of it is for Macmillan Cancer Support.
That's wonderful. And you even managed to supply teas, cakes and a few plants.
I know. Well, yeah, to me, the whole experience about going to see a garden is about the experience you have when you get there. And to me, having tea and cakes served on vintage china with teapots and homemade cakes is the bonus.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that.
Well, and I make all my own cakes, and we've got all this vintage china that we serve it on. And I've had 10,500 visitors in 5 years. Many of them are return visitors because they enjoy coming back and sitting in the garden. I mean, people have travelled. I mean, I had a lady from Canada the other day. Okay, her sister lives in Seaford, but she'd been following the garden on Facebook and was desperate to see it when she got here. When we opened for the National Garden Scheme a couple of weeks ago, an elderly couple who had a job standing drove a 3-hour trip either way from Bournemouth to see the garden. Last Sunday, a couple came from Portsmouth. So it has got quite a good reputation, but I am quite prolific about promoting it from all points of view.
Indeed you are, but how do you keep the garden fresh? How do you get the repeat business and keep them interested year to year?
Well, I mean, I've got a lot of it. My inspiration for the garden was really my dad and his sister, and they had very nice gardens, and they tried to make things look different from their own perspective. And when they died, I inherited a lot of their stuff, and a lot of their things are in the garden. And I really try and take my inspiration from them in terms of trying to create things. I mean, the latest edition is opposite us here, is this brick wall. I had to replace all this boundary last autumn, and I've always wanted a walled garden. So I was keen to somehow get a small piece of a walled garden. So that's new this year. But I just keep acquiring rubbish and find homes for it in the garden, and it just makes it look a bit different.
But Mission Control round the corner is quite a modest-sized greenhouse.
Well, it is. I mean, people say to me, do you have your own compost? Do you grow from seed? The plot just isn't big enough to be able to accommodate that. And I have to confess to being, well, my description of myself is I'm an instant gardener. If I have a vision of something I want to create, I haven't got time to wait for it. I want to be able to see it and create it. And so I tend to buy more established stuff and then create it. I mean, all the block of planting that you can see up towards the green door, people are just utterly enthralled by it. I mean, it's all in pots, but I just overplant. Okay, some things will not survive, but I pay that price because I want to create the effect you've got there with perhaps 30 different plants or flowers peeping out from effectively the same block of planting, and it just creates a nice illusion.
Now, do you have pests you have to deal with, or are the elements your worst enemy?
I think the elements are the worst. It is really the wind. I mean, the wind is horrific. The front garden, which has obviously been created to cope with the elements, it amazes me. I mean, we had a horrendous storm 4 weeks ago, and it was awful, the weather, and I thought, the poor garden. And the next day I went out to tidy up, and the front garden really didn't look as though it had been battered. The back garden, I mean, that fence is really the prime area that gets damaged. There's a clematis over the door that gets badly damaged. All the buddleia and the lavateria on the fence had to cut down a few weeks ago, but it's come back again, so fingers crossed.
So you use it as an opportunity to cut things back?
Yeah, and I think also that, as I said earlier on when we moved here, and I thought, coastal garden, I must be mad. I did a lot of research to find out plants that should work in a coastal garden. And I was horrified to find that when I bought them, they all died. And my philosophy now is, I don't care what I buy. I buy a plant that I really like or want to see in the garden, and I'll follow the instructions as best I can, but I'll just look after it. And
now, did you have any design help when you started?
not knowing anything about gardening, and I don't, I commissioned a garden designer to come in. He spent ages here drawing the garden. He went away and he came back with a two-dimensional plan on a piece of paper, and I took one look at it and thought, I could do better than that myself. So I just waved my 200 quid and started with the summer house here and just worked my way down the garden. No plan, it just evolved, and is still evolving.
And still evolving.
Yeah.
What plans do you have for the future?
Well, as you'll have seen, there's not a lot of space left. So
No.
it's more about trying to rejig what I've got. As I say, every year I take all the art that's around the garden will come up and it will be repositioned somewhere different. I will again replant down the bottom there. I'd like to, the biggest thing we need to do is to do something with the front of the house, but it's finding the funds to get that drive replaced and some more planting at the front, but we'll see.
Well, you have certainly captivated us today.
Thank
You've
you.
shown us just what you can do with quite,
Yeah.
if you don't mind me saying, a modest plot, but you have crammed your family, your life,
Yeah.
and a lot of enthusiasm and creativity
Thank
into
you.
a very small space against some most challenging
Yeah.
conditions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing it with
You're
us.
welcome. What's the point in having a nice garden if you don't share it? That's the
Well,
whole point of having one.
And it's all in a good cause.
Brilliant.
Geoff,
Thank
thank
you.
you.